There is a word, I know I use the word vicious circle, but someone told me there is a philosophical concept. But the thing of, every product has a maker. Yeah? So the existence of the maker is the product.
Yes.
Yeah? You're the evidence of the existence of your father. It's that simple. Now, can we say that I was born by myself?
No.
Why not?
Just doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense. Yeah. Now, but just in saying, it just doesn't. Reason just doesn't allow.
That's the reason.
Yeah. Right. So, how is it possible that creation could come, will itself into being?
That's not possible.
And then what you would have is this. That's what Sidi Ibn Ashir is saying, is that if it created itself, it's literally, the two opposites would gather.
Yeah.
Which is impossible. Because he says, look, that's impossible. Yeah? That's impossible. Because if it created itself, I actually still do, as a confession.
Go ahead.
Watch these idiots talk about physics. Well, I mean, some of them are really good, but some of them are really. There's this American guy who was building. Like they built that thing in, was it in Switzerland? The Goddard. Yeah. He's building something where he wants to create, the gas masses for the Big Bang. Do you think that it's possible? He's doing it, by the way, outside of Washington D.C. He's, I think either he is American, might be, American, Asian, Chinese, or Hawaiian, or someone. But it just doesn't make sense. Even if he succeeds, has he done something out of nothing? So he hasn't actually succeeded, has he?
God didn't use a hydrogen collider, did he?
Yeah. And this is the thing that the author is saying, that it's impossible that the world could make itself, just as we can't. If it did, it would create that vicious circle again. But would it? How would it begin?
You're really looking for a dilemma. Is that the way you're looking?
No, I'm not looking for a dilemma.
Okay.
Goes back to basics, no? Allah, creation.
No, that's for us.
Yeah.
That's for us. But the thing is that it's always been, the philosophical thing that the world has existed. The world is eternal. It's always existed. But then there is the thing that it has a beginning. Yeah? So if it is eternal but it has a beginning, when did it begin? How did it begin? So did it begin by itself? And if it began by itself, how? It just doesn't. And that's what, the author and the commentator are saying, it's just impossible. And what happens is they're introducing this whole genre of impossible things. Because what you've got to understand in Kalam, and I'm just skipping all this because our theologians, they, lot of, how they understood things, the rational sciences and all that, they were influenced by the Greeks. Some say, quite heavily. But the thing is, it's never been updated. The arguments.
Yeah.
It's like, the arguments that are now, you won't find them in our...
So why don't the scholars write new books?
They actually do.
They do.
No one, I haven't got the money to translate. There's a teacher of mine, Siddha, you met Siddha? No? Siddha Abdurrahman from Rabat. Yeah. Dr. Taha Abdurrahman, he's the Muslim philosopher in the Muslim world.
Really?
Yeah. Dr. Taha Abdurrahman is retired now. He writes in Arabic. His books have been translated into Persian and Turkish. He is a critic of Western, philosophy, especially, the logic side, because his specialization is logic. What he's done is he's brought, the terminology, not the arguments, because the arguments are pointless, because the arguments keep changing. But, the terminology, he's brought it up to modern times. The philosophical, because a lot of our terms are based on Greek philosophy. And some of these arguments, I know some of them arguments are circular, but they were based on them. Because Baghdad was the center where, the House of Wisdom was, and but since then, there hasn't been. Yeah. Well, alhamdulillah, we're living, we have this man around us. He actually has a work which he's brought to date. Anyway, moving on to verse 24. لو لم يكن قدم وصفه لازم حدوثه دور تسلسل حتم.
So did you explain the line before that?
Which one?
وذا محال
23.
وحدوث العالم من حدث الأعراض مع تلازم.
Yeah.
Okay.
That if both of them, the two opposites gather, it's impossible. Because one would negate the other. It's like, what does God say in the Quran? If there were two gods,
Then they
would you see the perfection? You just wouldn't. 24.
If his attribute were not timelessness, then his coming into being in time as a chain of events would be necessarily true.
Okay. That's self-explanatory, isn't it?
What was that again?
That if he did not have this attribute of always being, then it would be necessary. Yeah. And that would create that vicious circle.
Yeah, people think they're so deep when they go, alright, God created man, but who created God? They clearly don't agree on what God is.
Yeah, but the thing is then, if we accept that someone created God, then who created that God and who created that God? And that's that vicious circle. That's why to negate that, we obligate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the wujud, to have qidam. Yeah? We don't need to go into more detail than that. Okay. 25. لو أمكن الفناء لأنتفع القدم لو مثال الخلق حدوث إن حتم.
If annihilation were possible, then timelessness would be nullified. If he resembled creation, his coming into being would be necessarily true.
Now, you know, we got two sets of if. Yeah?
Three.
No, here in this verse.
Okay.
In this verse, we.
This
Yeah. Now, if you know God could come to an end, it wouldn't negate the attribute of qidam. Now, why is that one there? Have a think. What do the Christians believe? What happened on the cross? What happened to God?
Died.
God died. So how could he be God? He died. How could Krishna be God? He died. God has this eternal attribute of always being. And if he resembled creation, yeah, then you know it would be necessary that he be created. This, you know, I can't remember this. Hanbali scholars, what's it called? Name. He said that, you know, he found evidence of everything other than him having a beard.
A beard.
Yeah. Because, you know, anthropomorphism is a fact. You know, there were scholars that way inclined. And they... it's a personal... when I get time, I flick through some books. How this came about, you know, people presenting God as a human being. Because you can't, you know, if you can imagine it, why would you want God to be like you? Unless you've got a God. What's the word?
Complex.
Yes. No, not God. God complex. It's like you want to be like God. Why would you liken God to you?
But Allah blew his breath into Adam. So
No.
What do you mean?
Okay, go on.
So why can't we say God is within us, or we are God? Why can't we say that?
We go back to the first point.
He blew his breath into Adam.
No, there's God and there's creation. So when we say the house of God, what does it mean?
That's a really good question, that is.
No, this is the house of God. God says the mosques are the houses of God.
It's the place where you can find Allah, but you can find
No.
Allah everywhere.
No, it's just mudaf. Yeah. Doesn't mean that, you know, God is there. Does God have a breath?
Well, he must do.
No. How does Allah, when Allah wants to create, what does He do?
So it says, be.
Kun fayakun. So how do we understand the breath then?
But my problem with all of this is that we create the rules first, and then we interpret the Quran according to those rules.
No. Did Arabic exist before the Quran?
Yeah.
So Arabic was a language understood. Yeah?
Yeah.
It was a language understood.
Yeah.
Rules were known.
Yeah.
So,
But it does say in the Quran that Allah blew his soul into Adam, or his breath into Adam. It does say that, right?
yeah.
So why can't we say we are Allah?
You're creating, right? You can't be God.
No, but you're just tying us to this rule.
I'm not tying you. God is. He says, "Laysa kamithlihi shay'un."
Right, so how do you resolve that?
I told you. There's the board. Throw everything against that rule. "Laysa kamithlihi shay'un wa huwa as-sami'ul basir." That's His rule, not mine.
Right, so what does it mean when Allah says that He blew His breath into Adam? What does that mean?
It means how close, how intimate, how important Adam is to God.
But why didn't you just say that?
Because you don't understand Arabic. That's the problem. When an Englishman comes home and says, "Love, put the kettle on," what does he mean?
He wants to put the kettle on.
No, what does he mean?
He wants a cup of tea.
He wants a cup of tea. But he says, "Put the kettle on." Now, you go to America and tell them, "Love, put the kettle on." They speak English. Does it make sense? Has it clicked yet? No. Shall I repeat it again?
I understand the words coming out your mouth, but I just don't see why we have to believe that.
Why not? Because then you're bringing something that is sublime, yeah, down to your level, mate.
But why is that an issue?
It is an issue because you're imperfect. You're imperfect. He's perfect.
Personally, I think this whole anthropomorphism thing, I don't really think there's a good argument against it.
There's a very good argument against it. He says, Allahu Samad, Lam Yalid, wa Lam Yulad, wa Lam Yakul Lahu Kufuwan Ahad. Yeah? There is no one equal to Him. You want to bring a similitude to Him?
But we are like Allah-esque, aren't we?
How?
Because His soul is in us.
He has a soul now? What's a soul?
That thing.
No, what's a soul? Is created. Soul is created, mate. How can something that is created be God? Yeah? Wherever you go, you'll see His signs, not Him. It's like, the dung is evidence that the camel exists. Adam is evidence that God made him, how close he was. Yeah? Does not mean that he has become God. What we've got to do is understand how minuscule, how little we are in, the majesty that God is, that we can even, compare. I'll share something with you, which Bara bin Hazim. Have you heard of that name? Bara bin Hazim, the Sahabi radiallahu anhu.
Bara, no.
Yeah, very famous companion. Imam Malik radiallahu anhu transmits this. He says, he said something and he repeated the action of the Prophet ﷺ. He repeated the words of the Prophet ﷺ, and then he repeated the action. In the action he raised his hand. After repeating the words, he raised the hand to show that this is how the Prophet ﷺ raised his hand. He dropped it suddenly, bowed his hand and wept immensely. His beard, drenching. Afterwards, Imam Malik radiallahu anhu explains this now. He says, look at this man. Why is he weeping? All he's done is repeat the words of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and raise his hand. But he drops his hand suddenly and weeps. Why? Because he's compared his hands to that of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he can't believe he's done such a thing. He can't believe he's compared his action to the action of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is Sayyidina Imam Malik radhiyallahu anhu. And he says, now hear this. He says, just as he couldn't, fathom him comparing the action of his to that of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we can't fathom comparing any of our limbs and understanding, where the ayats of the Quran in which those names come, which allude to an attribute. It's like, the neck or hand or face. Imam Malik radhiyallahu anhu says, anyone pointing to those, chop them off. Chop them off. Now, that's how, clear it is. Clear. Now, Imam Malik radhiyallahu anhu, he has 900 sheikhs from whom he transmits in the Muwatta. 600 of them are tabi'in, people who saw the faces of those who saw Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, if his understanding isn't correct, I don't know whose is. He's saying chop them off.
Chop off where? The necks of...
No, he's saying if someone hints, where those hadith about the hand or the shin or the descent or, bal yadahu mabsudatan, where the Jews say that, God's hands are tied behind his neck. He says if they point towards the neck when they mention this, chop them off.
Of their gesture, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Believing that, that is what God meant. Because what God is saying is that the Jews are saying that God is tight-fisted. There's nothing about the hands or neck. Because that's what it means in Arabic. But God says, I'm open-handed. Even in English, open-handed means? Generous.
The analogy you gave of the Bedouins who pointed to the dung and said this is proof of the camel.
Yeah.
The problem is if you point to the dung and say that is the camel.
Yeah.
And that's what I think.
Yeah.
Or like the shadow of something.
Yeah.
It's not really there.
It's not there. But does it make sense? Yeah? Is we can't... What you've got to do, the problem is that, translations have done more harm than benefit. Last year when Sheikh Abdul Rahman was here, I exactly same conversation. I said, look, when they translate the Quran, they will translate wajh as face, yad as hand. And he said, Sheikh Amjad Mahmood was there, he said, you should write something against these people. Because they should interpret, not translate. They should give the correct interpretation, not literally translate God as a hand or face or...
But what's the big deal if Allah does have a hand or a face?
God. I want to move on there. Because the thing is that if you apply hand, what does it mean? Where's the rest of it? What are you saying? Does it make sense? Do you understand the big deal there? Yeah? You've brought the mountain to the ant. You reduced it to the ant. 26. لو لم يجب وصف الغناء له الافتقار لو لم يكن بواحد لما قدر.
If the attribute of independence were not necessarily true with respect to him, he would be in need. If he were not one, he would have no power.
Okay. Now, again, this is self-explanatory. These are, a set of 6 ifs. That if we didn't obligate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with, absolute independence, yeah, He would not be able to establish Himself within Himself. And there wouldn't be the evidence for Him being one. Because this negates, goes towards explanation of that ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, if there were 2 gods, you would not see the perfection. Because 2 people would be arguing. I remember someone saying, what happens if they agree? I said, for how long? Because, yes, it is possible that, the 2 gods could agree, but for how long? Okay.
And then you're limiting him by the agreement of the other God.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. 27. لو لم يكن حيا مريدا عالما مقادرا لما رأيت عالما. سبحان الله. 27. If he was not, living, willing, knowledgeable, powerful, you would not see the world. You would not see creation. Yeah? Now, we already talked about that, the attributes are in time are manifest. Ma'anawi. That's what's meant. If he didn't have these positive attributes, we wouldn't see creation around us. Because he wouldn't have these attributes to affect. 28. وتعالى في 6 قضايا باطل قطعا مقدما إذا مماثل.
Any consequence of these 6 propositions is absolutely false. Thus, any preceding premise is likewise false.
Okay. That's self-explanatory. Because all the preceding 6, the low if questions, they're all based on falsehood, so they're false in themselves. Now we move on to the final point on specifically with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 29. والسمع والبصر والكلام بالنقل مع كماله ترام.
And proof of his hearing, seeing, and speech is afforded by transmission and also by deduction from his perfection.
Okay. Now, do you remember so far everything that we have covered has been by reason? We've not, based it on
Sharia or habits.
Yeah, it's not been on what they call naqli dalil, some revelation by transmission. But some basar, hearing and sight, and speech, they're both based on reason, like we've already covered, but they're also covered by transmission from the Quran. Yeah. Now we already covered وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. So that's evidence from the Quran. وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا. That God spoke to Moses. Yeah. Now that's from the Quran. In the Hadith, there is that you're not calling on a God that is, deaf, absent. You're calling upon someone who is, hearing, seeing. And there is, unanimity, ijma, that, God is attributed with these attributes. Now, there's, in Aqidah, there isn't more than this on worth going. But the final point on this verse is that, Aqidah is divided, Aqli and Naqli, the evidence in Aqidah, by reason and by revelation. And there are 4 divisions. The first division is that Dalil Aqli is for wujud, qidam, baqa, qudra, irada, ilm and hayat. That's the first division. They're Aqli. Then Naqli deals with everything that is, going to deal with, reward and resurrection and, the states that are going to happen in the next world. Those are, by transmitted texts. And the third division is where, there's Dalil Aqli and Naqli, which is, hearing, sight and speech. And the fourth one, on which there's a difference of opinion, is that, is the first division or the third division, from the first or third, like Wahdaniyah, they don't know where to put it. But on the first 3, you find that, majority of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Sabah Mathani, thereby Aql, and everything to do, from the day of resurrection, they're all to do. And the states afterwards, they're all by Naql. Are we okay so far?
Yeah. So it's saying وَالسَّمْعُ وَالْبَصْرُ وَالْكَلَامُ بِالنَّقْلِ. So that means that Allah's hearing, sight and speech, we know that through transmission, through the texts.
As well as
Aql.
Aql. But what you notice is that the Naql has been brought in last. It's important. That we can't, affirm a point if we can't affirm it by reason first. Okay.
So, an ayah comes in the Quran. You have to affirm it by reason before you affirm it by.
No.
Okay.
No.
I just want to make sure.
No. We talk about, about those attributes of God. And what you'll find is that majority of, the things to do with Allah, what we affirm by reason, you will find it, evidence for it in the Quran. But the thing is that we affirm it. You need to be convinced by reason first. Because, for instance, God, the Wahdaniyah, there's so many ayats in the Quran. Yeah? God being powerful, so many ayats in the Quran. God, having will, so many ayats in the Quran. majority of them, ghina al-mutlaq, the ayats in the Quran. But you need to be convinced yourself. You need to have conviction. You can't just say, it's like once you have conviction, you can back that up by the Quran.
Basically, what you're saying is you can't have.
Blind.
Yeah, so you can't say, oh, I'm backing this up with the Quran, but you're actually not convinced about yourself.
Yeah. You need to be convinced yourself. And how you convince yourself is you need to use your reason. Okay. The final low لو استحال ممكن أو واجب قلب الحقائق لزوما أوجب. So could you 30.
If the conceivable became inconceivable or necessarily true, realities and truths would necessarily be turned upside down.
Okay. Now, we've already covered, what's conceivable. And that is what, what is correct by reason, in reason. Its existence and its non-existence. Yeah. Like, reward for someone who is obedient. Punishment for someone who is a sinner. The sending of the messenger, emissaries. The existence of Jannah and Jahannam. And similar to that. Also that, it's conceivable in right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to leave all possible actions or to do them. Yeah? He can do what he wants. It's not an obligation. We can't oblige him to do anything. Yeah? And that is not, something that is impossible. What the author is mentioning here is that if it was wajib, mandatory on him to do a thing that is possible, yeah, it will be necessary from that it will turn its realities to the realities that are wajib, which are not, correct by intellect, like his existence. Does that make sense? It's the same if it was impossible on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do a possible thing, and you necessitated that. You made it necessary on him. Yeah? It would turn what is, possible to, the reality of impossible. Meaning which is not correct by reason. Like, his non-existence. He does what he wants. You can't make it necessary, compulsory. Force him to do it. If you did force him, then it would turn realities on their hands. Like his existence coming into non-existence. And he says, this is, not correct intellectually, because his existence and non-existence is an impossible description. Yeah? Because if you describe his existence as by obligation or impossible, it would break its back Because, you know, you got two things pulling out. It's like a tug of war. It says it would turn what is wajib into what is impossible. And that's what he means. Allah knows best. This ends, you know, the section on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Okay.
Yeah? Now, what's the time?
5:30.
Huh?
5:30.
5:30. Okay, we got half an hour. You okay? I know we're...
Yeah.
Okay. 31. We've finished La ilaha illallah. Yeah? We begin Muhammad Rasulullah. Inshallah. 31. يجب للرسول الكرام الصدق أمانة تبليغهم يحق.
It is necessarily true that the noble messengers are truthful, trustworthy, and convey of the message.
Okay. Now, here, you know, like we had the three divisions. It's mandatory to believe about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala this. These are the mandatory beliefs that we need to hold about the emissaries of God, about the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam. Not just our messenger, but all messengers. Yeah? Now, here there are three things mentioned that are obligatory to hold. The first is that they have to be truthful. Yeah? They have to be truthful in what they convey, you know, what they transmit, the message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, meaning that they have to be true in what they report. And that has to be in conformity with, you know, what the command is. So, a lie cannot occur from them in a thing, from this. By, you know, design, that is by consensus, by unanimity, that they on purpose cannot lie. Or forgetfully. They can't forget either, and that's by the muhaqqiqeen, you know, the research scholars. So they can't lie, they can't forget. Those are mandatory.
They can't forget.
The Rasul said, I am made to forget.
Yeah. Yeah. Sahwan. Yeah. They can't forget on purpose. We're dealing with the message that they transmit from their Lord, what they report from their Lord. Yeah. They can't, you know, forget on purpose or forget. Period.
But what about the hadith about Laylatul Qadr, when the Prophet ﷺ was meant to tell them when it was?
What about Laylatul Qadr? It's a hadith. The hadith is about Laylatul Qadr, not about the message. Do you see the difference?
Okay.
We're talking about what they transmit of ahkam, for you know, straightforward commands. Yeah. If you forgot the Surah Laylatul Qadr, okay, you and I have got a discussion. Yeah. But you're bringing me a point. Al hadith, yeah, which is ahad. And you know, in Aqidah, ahad, hadith, we cannot base. They can, you know, give us information. They cannot give us certainty. Yeah? But the point is that the first point that we have to hold about the Rasul, all of them, alayhimu salatu wassalam, is that, you know, they are true. Truthful in what they transmit, what they report from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and on purpose they cannot lie. And on that point there is ijma'. There's a unanimity. The point down, is, forgetfulness. Yeah? By the muhaqqiqeen, the research scholars, they say that can't come either. That's a straightforward point. Those individual hadiths, if you come across them, read Insanul Kamil by Sayyid Alawi Maliki Makki. It's a book that, as long as he was alive, so many of us benefited from him, and he's passed away and so many people are benefiting. Insanul Kamil, he goes through all the hadith and ayats, and he gives you the correct understanding of the scholars of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. It's in English, if you can't read the Arabic. It's called The Perfect Man. It's by Sayyid Alawi Maliki Makki. Okay. The second point is that they are protected. Amana. Yeah? Because we all say that the Anbiya alayhim salatu wassalam and the Rasul from them, they're ma'soom. What do we mean by that? What we mean by that is they are protected. Yeah? Outwardly, their limbs, yeah? All their limbs, outwardly and inwardly, are protected from a haram or a makruh action occurring from them. Can't occur. That's a straightforward one. You find that, again, that's a straightforward. We don't need to go further than that. The third point, which is an obligation to hold about the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, is they convey the message that God commands them to convey. Yeah? To creation. They do not leave a thing from it by forgetfulness, yeah, or by purpose. They just don't. Those are, the three obligations that we are obliged to hold. That they're truthful, yeah, they're protected, and they convey the message. 1, 2, 3. Okay. The impossible, 32. محال الكذب والمنح كعدم تبليغ يا زكي. That it's impossible, this is verse 32, it's impossible, could you read the English for me? 32.
Impossible are lying and what is forbidden, as well as not conveying the message, O man of intellect.
Now the impossible are 3 again. Yeah? Lying. They can't lie. Which is the opposite of being truthful. Because a lie is not according to what they, report. Yeah? 3 is khiyana. Yeah? Khiyana is, cheating, deceiving, deception. Yeah? Which is an action which is haram. Or makruh, which is the opposite of protection. Yeah? 3 is that katman, they can't, conceal a thing from the matters that they are, obliged to convey to creation, which is, the opposite of tabligh. Yeah? As to, lying, this is, a lie, occurring. Again, it's something that is forbidden. And, the Zaki, he's put it there as something to balance the verse out.
Yeah.
Okay. The things that are permitted, 33. يجوز في حقهم كل عرض ليس مؤديا لنقص كالمرض.
Every human contingency is conceivable with respect to them, like illness, as long as this does not imply any imperfection.
Okay. Here we're informed that, you know, what's conceivable in right of the messengers, alayhi salatu wasalam. And these are, you know, human causes, which are not, you know, any fault. These can't be presented as faults. Like, you know, illnesses, hunger, pain, hurt by creation, eating, drinking, marriage, forgetfulness. This forgetfulness is not in the message, it's other than that. Yeah? But this is, you know, the forgetfulness is after the tabligh, not during the tabligh. Yeah? Now, you know, there's one point that I'd like to mention, because, you know, people have talked about it lately. You know, sorcery. Certain people say that, you know, those hadiths, that sorcery can't occur on the prophets. It's understood as an illness. Just as an illness can occur. Yeah? Because all physical ailments, illness that can occur physically to any human being can occur to them. Because it does not affect them.
In terms of their message.
Yeah, and no, it does not affect their heart either, or their spirit.
So you're saying that sihr can't be done on the prophets?
Yes,
It cannot be done.
it can.
It can. Okay.
Can. It's like they can fall ill.
Yeah.
When they fall ill, they take medication, they get cured. Yeah? Sihr is an illness. People, you know, you can eat certain food, it becomes the cause of you falling physically ill. Yeah? Someone gives you something red over certain food or magic or whatever, you become ill, then you know there's a cure for that. That does not affect their heart or their spirit. It's a physical. Yeah? Those narrations, if you go and look them up, they actually prove that Sayyidina, we know about the Prophet ﷺ, he was not physically, he was not spiritually affected, because he was still communing with the angels, which shows that, you know, his batin and his heart is not affected. Because if it was affected, how would he hear the angels? How would he know what to do? You know, the hadith where Jibreel is on towards the head and Mikael is towards his feet, and they're telling the conversations between them that, you know, what's been done, someone's done magic, what should he do? It's in a well.
I'm not familiar with that.
I'm telling you, it's there. But you see, that the hadith itself is evidence that it was a physical, like, you know, any other illness. And because the only people who denied those hadiths were the people of Bid'ah. You know, the Mu'tazila. And people who deny it now are...
Because I've heard that.
I've heard of that, but you know, our ulama, you know, Imam Mazari downwards, he says, look, this is our understanding. We put it down in the chapter of physical illnesses. And just as physical illnesses don't affect the spirit, this is a physical illness. It did not affect the... And we can't, you know, put them aside because, you know, that's too well known. So we have to look at, you know, the correct understanding. The correct understanding is in the hadith itself, because it shows that the Prophet ﷺ is still communing with the angels. So if he's communing, talking to the angels, the spirit is not affected. Okay. Okay. Now we come to again those if. Yeah. 34 and 35. لو لم يكونوا صادقين للازم أن يكذب الإله في تصديقهم إذ معجزاتهم كقوله وبر صدق هذا العبد في كل خبر.
Says here, if they were not truthful, it would be necessarily follow that God had told a lie in confirming them, since their miracles are equivalent to his saying, he is truthful. This slave has spoken the truth in everything he reports.
Okay. Now, this after the clear attributes of the emissaries of God are known, is that here the author is saying that if they were not true in what they report, it would be necessary, that God had lied. Yeah? Because He's the Allah is far above this, but He is the one that manifested their truthfulness and supported it by miracles. Yeah? It's like God is saying that this servant of mine is telling this truth and I'm supporting him by this. But if it is proven wrong, which is impossible, because we've already covered that, by the way, God does not lie. It's an impossible. Because here he says, well, كذب عليه تعالى محال. Yeah? And there's this word, I don't know if you've heard this word, tahaddi?
Challenge.
No. Tahaddi. It means that, the mu'jiza is in accordance. It affirms the message. It's not like, someone flying for nothing. Yeah? So, when the Prophet split the moon, is because they asked him why, to confirm that his message was true. Nothing about himself. Yeah? So, the mu'jiza is tahaddi. It has to be, in confirmation of the message. It can't be just, oh, we're going to do a miracle now. Yeah?
But like miracles, they can be done by the prophets and the awliya and also the enemies of Allah.
There's different grades. Different. You see, the mu'jiza are of the anbiya and the messengers. The karamat of the awliya. The delusion is of the magic.
They're all pretty impressive though, aren't they?
Not really. When the magicians threw their staffs, what did the staff of Moses do?
Eat them up.
Swallow them
But
up.
the Dajjal will do miracles as well.
Huh?
The Dajjal will do magic tricks and stuff.
Yeah, but what will happen when Sayyidina Isa in front of him, he'll melt like salt in water. Yeah. Inshallah. But what you'll find is that it has to be the whole thing. The definition of a mu'jiza is it breaks the norms of nature. Yeah. But aqidah-wise, it has to be affirming the message, confirming, in confirmation of the message. 36. لو انتفى التبليغ أو خان ختم أن يقلب المنحي طاعة لهم.
If the conveyance of the message by the messengers went unfulfilled, or they were to betray the trust Allah had placed in them, then the judgment regarding something forbidden by Allah would be reversed by the act of obedience to their disobedience.
Okay. Now, this again is if they negated the message. They negated the tabligh, or they held something back from what they were commanded to convey. I know we haven't got time to go into this, but this thing that you hear about a ayah that the Shia transmit, that Allah sends it down, and Jibreel keeps coming and the Prophet ﷺ doesn't convey the ayah, is just a mockery. Because if Allah commands, Allah sends revelation, and a messenger or prophet does not, the messengers don't have a choice, they convey. Because Allah affirms it, He says they don't even speak without their desire. إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَى. And for them, to hold something back would be, again, it's an impossibility, because Allah curses such an action. If you, it's from Surah Baqarah that, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَكْتَمُونَ, to the end of the ayah, اللَّاعِنُونَ. Allah curses the people who, hold back. And, from the category of scholars who have useful knowledge and they hold it back, they'll be, hooked by their tongues.
Wow.
And it's a sin. Yeah? And Allah protects him from sin. So again, it's an impossibility. 37, جواز الأعراض عليهم حجته وقوعها بهم تصلي حكمته.
The proof that contingencies can happen to them is that they occurred and were witnessed. Their patient endurance of whatever occurred was by His wisdom.
Okay, here is evidence that, it's permitted, what happens to humans can occur to the messengers, ﷺ. It's been witnessed, it occurred by people of their time, and it's been transmitted by tawatur. And, his illnesses, his hunger, his being, harmed by creation, on his physical body, it was witnessed. Yeah. As to their hearts, no, they are preserved. Yeah? Because they're preserved, and their wisdom is preserved. I think we don't need to go any further on that. That's a clear one. 38 and 38 and 39. وقول لا إله إلا الله محمد أرسله الإله يجمع كل هذه المعاني كانت لذا علامة الإيمان.
The declarations, there is no God except Allah and Muhammad has been sent by God, unites all these meanings, and for this reason it is an indication of Iman.
Okay. Now, this is such a beautiful, and we're limited by time because there's one more verse left. But here, the obligation on the one obliged that he know from the aqaid of Iman. It's an obligation in his haqq, by in the haqq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the haqq of the messengers, by way of tafsir. It's an obligation, and all of those are incorporated in La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And what we've covered so far is incorporated in that. We haven't got time to go in more detail than that. But inshallah, sometime in the future. We'll finish with the last verse for today, inshallah. وهي أفضل وجوه الذكر فاشغل بها العمر تفوز بالذخر.
And it is the best kind of dhikr, and so occupy your life with it and you will win a great treasure.
Okay. Here we're informed that, the statement of Tawheed is the best form of dhikr that has come. Its virtues, its rewards. On the intelligent one, on the aqil, is that, he occupy his life by remembering it in all times. And, it's an action that will attain him, treasures. And there is nothing equal to it. There's nothing equal to it. The ishara, of the author of these verses is what's narrated in Tirmidhi and Nisa'i, that Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that the best dhikr is La ilaha illallah, and the best dua is Alhamdulillah. And also from him sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is that the best, what I have said, and the Anbiya, I and the prophets before me, is La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. This is narrated by Imam Maliki in his Muwatta, and all the others. Imam Sanusi has how many? It's about 10 pages. Just the virtues in his minor commentary. I want to finish with sharing one thing about this hadith. Last verse, about occupying yourself and you will treasures. In Arabic, they, modern usage, bataka is a visiting card, but bataka is a small slither, a very small slither. That's a bataka. So the hadith is called Hadith al-Bataqa. It's found in nearly most of the books. I'll paraphrase, someone like me, on the Day of Judgment, in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the scales are there. We don't know what the scales are like. We're just, trying to understand. Every record from the day, from the time of obligation till the last breath is brought forward by the angels. Every record is being opened and put in the scales. No good at all. In the commentaries it goes that there's nothing left. That you can't put anything left in the scale. There's so much. One man's life record, nothing. So he's not done any good at all. There isn't anything good. And then angels, get ready to drag him away to the other place. And then, this voice comes, hold on. This slither of a paper comes flying. Can you, imagine, this scale that there's nothing else can be fitted, so weighty, of just no good at all. Slither of a paper comes, lands on the empty scale, outweighs his life's work. And then this voice says, nothing can outweigh the word of God. And on it was written, La ilaha illallah. So, occupy yourself. Because, finally, I know I said I'd finish with that one, but we'll definitely finish with this one. Because, it's, I don't know if we'll meet again. Because nothing's guaranteed. I don't know if I'll get out. But this Bedouin came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, is it in connection to what we're just talking about? Came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Sharia too much. I can't do all this. They were very, straightforward people. No, the nomads. He says, give me one thing that'll make life easy, make the rest easy. So the Prophet ﷺ said, keep your tongue moist with the dhikr of Allah. And that's the key, boys. Sorry, men. Yeah? That's the key. You want, everything. It increases love. You know the framework we were talking about? Why? You keep doing that, everything falls in place. Because the one you love is the one you remember. Why would you sit here for, from 11 till 6 o'clock if there wasn't love? And why wouldn't he reward you for that? When Allah wants good for you, He gives you understanding. This is what we've been all about. And one of our great Maliki Imams of this time, Sheikh Tahar Ayyam, of Azhar. People go for him because he's for sanad, ijazah. Just no. You just sit, we give understanding. So may Allah give us understanding. And if you can read Fatiha, for the author and the commentator. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم صل صلاة كاملة وسلم سلاما تاما على سيدنا محمد الذي تنحل به القاد وتنفرج به الكراب وتقطع به الحوائج وتنال به الرغائب وحسن الخواتم ويستسقى الغمام بوجهك الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه في كل لمحة ونفس بعدد كل معلوم لك سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. If I've said anything that I shouldn't have, please forgive me. If there has been, some benefit, share it. Because that's how, learn what you know. If you don't share it with anyone, at least share it with your wife. But don't keep it to yourself. So, alhamdulillah.
Could I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.